important and also critical to improve our students' learning. And in addition to our own expertise from the instructor punya side, we have outlined several key issues, and one of the most important issue is about assessment. And I think doing remote assessment is not easy. Changing our assessment composition is also not easy. And from the discussion, one of the idea is to go towards synergistic assessment. And we are very happy that somebody has already experimented it. And today we have that person sharing it with us. So I think all this happens because we engage each other, we talk to each other, and we had discussion. So this is part of our continuous quest to understand things better. And I hope by the end of our session today, we will appreciate what has been done. But I'm sure that will be the model of the School of Medical Sciences, which requires some adaptation to our respective program. So I think itu sebagai background lah to everybody. And this is also part of our initiative at USM to open up and to also educate further our academic staff towards online learning and also blended learning, so that we do it more effectively and our students feel that this is a new way of learning and their learning experience and learning outcomes are in no way being compromised by the situation, by the method, by the approach, and by other challenges that we will face. So I hope you all enjoy this, something that we need to do. And I think we should get some pointers and we should ask also questions so that we can try to practice it in our own respective programs. So itu je Prof Karim, mungkin sedikit latar belakang dan harapan daripada pihak universiti dan juga daripada agenda kita yang lebih besar lah untuk menyediakan Universiti Sains Malaysia dan universiti-universiti lain ke arah satu suasana pendidikan yang perhaps akan berubah dalam normal baru. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Dato'. So that will make my job easy because I don't have to say more. Tapi seperti mana yang disebut oleh Dato' Farhan tadi, I think assessment has been one of the weakest area, even dalam konteks face to face. So what's more in the online learning context. And next semester kita akan mula melaksanakan blended learning by substitution. Jadi saya rasa memang kenalah masanya untuk kita terus mempelajari dan memahami serta menghayati aspek assessment supaya staff akademik akan menjadi lebih competent to deliver our curriculum in the best impactful way. Jadi pada petang ini kita sangat bernasib baik kerana kita ada Profesor Madya Dr. Muhammad Saiful Bahari Yusof. Saya akan memberikan sedikit pengenalan mengenai beliau bagi siapa yang belum mengenali. Di USM memang Dr. Muhammad Saiful ini sangat terkenal lah. Walaupun beliau sebenarnya berkhidmat di kampus kesihatan di Kelantan ya, di pusat pengajian Department of Medical Education, School of Medical Sciences USM ini di Kelantan ya. Tapi banyak masa beliau sebenarnya berada di sini di kampus induk juga kerana khidmat beliau, kepakaran beliau yang digunakan oleh pelbagai pihak. Jadi mungkin tuan-tuan dan puan-puan semua boleh baca long biodata ya. Maybe I just read it very quickly. So he's a medical doctor with Masters of Sciences and PhD in Medical Education. So medical doctor tapi ada PhD dalam medical education. He has conducted research related to medical student well-being, mental health, psychometric, validity, reliability. Ini semua yang berkaitan dengan assessment I guess. Development of measurement tool, scholarship of teaching and learning, student personal and professional development, personality, emotional intelligence, student admission and assessment. So you can see a wide range of expertise dan juga kepakaran yang Dr. Saiful ada ya. Dan Dr. Saiful juga sedang membantu universiti untuk melaksanakan teaching track ya. Beliau telah terlibat bersama dengan pihak CDAE membangunkan teaching teaching evaluation tool ataupun instrument for teaching evaluation yang sekarang kita akan gunakan dalam pelaksanaan teaching track bagi staff USM. Beliau juga sangat aktif dalam bidang penyelidikan. He has published more than 100 articles in various journals such as medical education dan jurnal-jurnal yang yang dalam Q1, Q2. He is editor-in-chief also of Education in Medicine Journal and served as a reviewer to various journals. Has been invited as speaker for conferences, seminars related to student assessment, curriculum design and development, quality assurance, development of psychological measurement. So bagi universiti yang turut serta ini, jika anda semua memerlukan kepakaran ini, you know who to find, where to find him. He completed a 1-year medical education editorial internship program provided by Editorial Board of Medical Education Journal, Association for Study in Medical Education, United Kingdom. He received gold medal for Reimagining Education Teaching Delivery Award 2016, Best of the Best Award and gold medal for International Innovative Practices in Higher Education, Excellent Educator Award dan pelbagai lagi award yang lain. Jadi tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, pada petang ini we have the experts here. Jadi tanpa melengahkan masa lagi, saya ingin menyerahkan sesi ini kepada Dr. Saiful. Silakan Dr. Saiful.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good afternoon everyone. Thank you so much to CDAE, Prof. Karim and Datuk Farhan and everyone for joining us. And I was given a task to share what has been practices and what to be practiced in the future. And let me share my slide. Where is the slide? Okay.
Okay.
Everyone can see my slide, I think.
Yes. Nampak.
Okay, good. So now let me put a point. Okay, now synergistic assessment, synergies for better learning. This is the title that I was given and the task that I'm going to deliver today. So hopefully I'm going to cover several aspects. So basically I'm going to revisit on the assessment, the basic of assessment, and then perhaps in integrated manner, I'm going to discuss about the current practices, what the concept and principle of synergistic assessment, and perhaps let's envision ways to synergize of our assessment for better learning. So these are the 4 focuses that I'm going to talk. And perhaps if you have anything, you can interject me, you can ask me in the middle of my presentation, I don't mind. But if you have anything that you like to ask further or maybe discuss later, you can write down your questions or queries in the chat box. Now, before we start, let me ask you a question. I would like you to respond to this. There's a simple survey. It's just a very simple survey. Okay, so and using mentimeter.com. So what does synergistic assessment mean to you? I'm giving you about maximum 5 minutes to think and to write, and it is completely anonymous. So don't worry. So just share whatever you have in your mind when you see term synergistic assessment. So I'm giving you 5 minutes from now. Just go to mentimeter.com and just enter the code and share your thoughts about synergy assessment from your point of view. Okay, interesting, no idea. Is there anyone have any idea? Don't know. That is why we here to learn. Okay, that's interesting. Not sure. Combination assessment. Okay. Assessment that is beyond current practice. Formative summative dichotomy. Assessment that gives in-depth meaning to the results given by students. Okay. Yes. Any more? So we have okay, integrated. We move. Okay. Okay, application of multiple types of assessment that when combined together we provide impactful learning. Integrated assessment, not sure what are the elements to be integrated. Assessment that should be better than existing together for better effect. Joint assessment, assessment for multidisciplinary background. Authentic assessment, holistic assessment. Different style of assessment, no idea, please tell us. Awesome, integrated. Okay, so we have a couple of minutes, another 2 minutes. Integrated from different subject but same outcomes. Okay. Oh yeah, by the way, we have how many participants? Let's see. Okay, we have 81. So I'm not going to allow everybody to put in, otherwise we require more time. So another 2 minutes. Combination of different assessment, combination integration of a few assessment into one, no idea, but from a quick search, it also tells me nothing. Yeah, definitely. I can feel you. It's nothing on the internet. Maybe it's how we can combine various assessment methods across, provide more holistic and learning outcome. Comprehensive assessment. Okay.
Ini soalan tak boleh Google
Huh?
Ini soalan yang tak boleh Google ni.
Yes. No googling. This is very high order thinking. The combination of formative and summative assessment. Okay, we have another minute to go. Let's see how many more can we see responses from our colleague. The combination of multidisciplinary elements topic to achieve learning objective. Yeah, any last sharing of your thoughts? Okay, assessment that combine various methods. Now, let's wait another one. Let's make it 30. Okay, 29 right now. And we have another half a minute. Okay, I assume most of you want to know what is synergistic assessment. Okay, now let's move on. Okay, where is my slide presentation? This one. Okay, now let's start. Okay, before we go for synergistic assessment, let us see what assessment really means. So, according to OECD 2013, the term assessments refer to judgments, in that our judgment on individual student progress and achievement of learning goals. I think so far this is the clearest definition of assessment that I ever had so far from the OECD. So I think there is something that we already know. Now, when we talk about assessment, there are 3 different approaches of assessment. And we have formative, we have summative, and the latest one is programmatic. So what those formative, summative, programmatic really mean? So in terms of formative, is basically the main purpose of formative is guiding future learning. So the keyword is guiding. And then the second keyword is about reassurance of learning. So maybe we need to provide reassurance of learning to our students. So basically is more toward feedback. And then the third function of formative is about to promote reflections on what they learn. So the reflection is the keyword. And last but not least, the most important rules of formative assessment is to shape values of our students. So this is something very important formative assessment. And the nature of formative assessment usually is low stake assessment. So there is nature of formative assessment. And in terms of summative, basically the main function of summative is to make judgment about competency and the fitness of our student to practice in the respective field. So basically we are making judgment to decide the fate of student learning, whether they have achieved certain learning outcomes at the end of the program, or they need some remediation in order for them to achieve the learning outcome that we have expected them to achieve at the end of the program. And we call it program learning outcomes, structured learning outcomes, and many other outcomes as well. And the latest one is about the programmatic. What are so special about programmatic? It emphasizes on longitudinal collection of multiple low-stake assessment. And they call it as learning evidence. If you are looking at the literature, they consider it as artifacts of learning. So they call the learning evidence is the artifacts of learning, just like those are in the archaeology. So all these are basically artifacts of learning. So we can put it as learning evidence for what? For examiners or maybe panel of examiners to make decision on the competency as well as the fitness to practice of our students. And not only that, the programmatic assessment emphasize on the richness of feedback to promote learning. And in terms of the programmatic element, programmatic assessment, it can be diagnostic, therapeutic, prognostic, as well as making high-stake decision on the student. So basically, programmatic is something that they combine formative and summative longitudinally for a panel of group of panel to make decision on the student fate. So basically, programmatic is the combination of formative and summative. So they are balancing the benefits of both worlds, formative and summative. So they call it as programmatic. So this is the three approaches that perhaps I just briefly summarize to everyone. And if you are looking at the utility of the assessment, yes, definitely we have to ensure whatever the assessment tools or assessment instrument that we use is must have a valid and reliable in terms of the scoring. However, on the other side, we need to ensure that we need to consider feasibility, the acceptability of faculty to use the instrument, and the most important is the educational impact of those assessments will have on our students, particularly in the future, personal and professional development. How much impact of our instrument of assessment will give to the students in the future. So these are things we need to balance. However, with the new norms, with the current pandemic, we need also to consider these four things. Because in the new norms, in higher education, we need to ensure that whatever the assessment system or design that we are developing, we need to ensure that the social distancing is there. We need to maintain the personal space so that they are not in the contact, in the close range contact. And it needs to be done in a smaller group compared to the previous one. And in fact, now we are in the medical school right now, we are running clinical examination in a smaller group, and this is already 4 days in a row and takes a lot of time to complete all those medical students, clinical examination. And definitely, if you can see right now, they are more common for everybody to use digital platform to do a lot of things, and including assessment. So we need to consider this new norm as well. And not enough for that, not enough new norms, the utility of assessment. We need to consider as well what the goals of assessment. So this is where the assessment goals need to be considered as well when we design and we consider any assessment, including the synergistic assessment. So the first goal is we want to ensure that whatever we do is about optimizing the capabilities of the students, of the learners, so that it will provide more motivation for them to learn more, and then provide future direction for them to be in their own career. And the second one is, I think the most important is, if you are in the professional body, for example, like medical, engineers, lawyer, and many more who are involved the public, we need to protect the public from incompetent graduates, because incompetent graduates might have given might cause a lot of unwanted consequence as a result of their incompetency, particularly in that particular field when they are advising or giving services to the public. So this is something that we need to consider as well. And last but not least, I think the third one is whatever the degree we provide here, whatever training we provide here, they are prepared. They are prepared for further training. It means that they can be further trained to become a more competent and more professional, or maybe more specialized in the area of that particular interest that the students are involved. So this is assessment goal. Now let's go back to OECD. In 2013, if basically the synergistic assessment has been mentioned there. Because OECD in 2013 said that a complete assessment frame, in view of generating synergies between each component, is already there in 2013. But the OECD is not basically put it as synergistic assessment rather than generating synergies between its component. And all this has been mentioned somewhere in 2013. So now today, we will explore together and let's see how this concept will emerge, and then perhaps whether it is applicable in your own setting as well. So let's see how. And if you're looking at the environmental science subjects, I'm Googling for synergy and the condition of synergy, which is synergism. So synergy is, like you mentioned just now in what does synergistic assessment mean? Yes, definitely. It's about the creation of whole part that is greater than the simple sum of its part. Okay, and perhaps if you are looking at the condition, synergism is when we get a greater effect by combining two or more components together than we will get by adding the effects of each. So basically, it's a condition when we get the synergies in the combination of two different components or more components. So now let's look at what is synergistic assessment. Okay, now this is the definition of synergistic assessment. So synergistic assessment creates synergies between assessment components. Okay, for what? For generating greater learning impacts than individual component through fitting purpose. I mean that assessment fit the purpose, and then assessment building on its connectedness between the components, is emphasized on learning evidence, and it prevents unnecessary load to the learners. Okay, so this is something that we can work on, this definition and concept. And let me put in the diagram. So basically, putting in the diagram is easier rather than the text. So synergistic assessment based on that concept. Okay, so fitting the purpose means that whatever we do, we need to ensure that the purpose is justified. And building on the connectedness, it means that we need to ensure that the connection, the relationship between the components can amplify the effects on the learning of our learners. So basically, the connectedness is the key word to ensure that we connect correctly so that we can amplify the effects of two components when they are together. And then emphasizing on learning evidence, there is something that we have heard just now in the programmatic assessment, which is artifacts of learning. And last but not least is to prevent unnecessary load, because if we do duplication of assessment, it will create unnecessary load, and unnecessary will impact the well-being of the student. And we have seen that in the literature, assessment in particular have a lot of impact, unwanted impact basically to the psychological health and mental well-being of students. And from our local study as well, we have seen that the academic, particularly assessment, really have a negative impact on health and well-being of the students. So basically, these are the four things that I'm going to showcase to you through an example that we did. Yes, and then once we connect all the dots, through fitting purpose, building, emphasizing, preventing, and necessary, and how we can enhance this concept into high impact assessment practice. Okay, now let's start with fitting purpose. And when we fitting purpose, definitely the constructive alignment must be there. So this is basically the OBE. Okay, this is OBE basically, fitting purpose. And it's just aligned with the OBE concept. So that is very good. Okay, it's very good. And then let's put examples. Okay, now these examples. For example, let's say I took it from the real courses, the 5 courses in the master program. So basically, when we go through the 5 courses of Master Science of Medical Education in semester 2, just recently, when we put it, we can basically categorize into 5 main learning outcomes across the 5 courses. Example here, adequate, not able to explain the subject matters adequately, able to organize various information in logical manner, able to appraise various information based on the best evidence, able to perform specific skills under minimal guidance, and then able to integrate meaningful values to information. So basically, if we're looking at the taxonomy, C2, C4, C5, P5, and A4, and what were practiced and what kind of assessment that has been done. So for example here, this is the kind of assessment that has been implemented. Research proposal, critical present essay, real-time presentation, because it's online, we have a real-time, the synchronous presentation, and proposal presentation. And then when we talk about formative, we emphasize on feedback. So even though we are taking some of portion and contribute to the summative, but the feedbacks will be given through this formative assessment, online quiz, literature review, reflective journal, pre-recorded video and reflective journal. You can see that reflective journal appear 2 times to assess C5 and A4. And in terms of programmatic, it's only one course coordinator report, because the coordinator will give their reports according to the courses at the end of the semester, after they're seeing through the performance of the students. So basically it's programmatic because longitudinal, multiple, low-stake assessment has been done by the coordinator on the student. So basically this arrangement of our current practice. So later on, I'm going to show you a bit more. Then after we have clear with the purpose across the 5 courses, and we know that we can connect the dots. We can connect the dots. Now, let me put the building on the connectedness. So this is basically before we connect. Basically, they are independent. We can see that there are a lot of things there. So at least now student, because online assessment, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16, and 21 assessment tasks that the student have to go through, and after going through all this learning outcome, we realized that there's something that we can connect. So what we did after a lot of discussion with the course coordinators in the meeting, because we need to meet, because we need to communicate with different coordinators for different courses, and then we decided to have a shared assessment. We can see that now we realize that, basically the OM, FDL, basically we can combine because they have a similar content, almost similar content, and then the outcome is almost similar. And why not? After the negotiation, we have to come and reach a consensus. We are going to do it together. So we can see that now we are linking the dots, and those who can be connected, we are connecting them. So basically, we managed to connect only few, okay? But it's good because we reduced 3 assessment already, assessment tasks. From 21, now it's become 18, but still a lot. It's still a lot. Later on, I will share you a little bit more. And then what we are very much concerned when we go through that, we ensure that everything covered, because we are looking at learning evidence. Are we having sufficient learning evidence, even though we are doing online? For example, it's online. Do we have enough evidence to support the achievement and the attainment of the learning outcome by our students? So basically, we go through one by one, until we are confident as a team, as a concept. Yes, we are quite happy with this kind of arrangement, we covered most of the learning outcome as we expected students to achieve at the end of semester 2 at least. So this is kind of checking, ensure that learning evidence is there. And then once we talk about learning evidence, is basically assessment tasks that we give to the student. So as I mentioned before, it's about direct, indirect. We can observe, mean that the student demonstrate the performance in front of us, or maybe unobserved. We give them assignments, and hopefully the assessment task that has been done by students will describe the learning of our students while completing the assignment. So basically, this is just example. So we have both even in our example just now. And then if we're looking at the, looking at the low stakes to the high stake, basically why we are so concerned about the learning evidence just now, we want to ensure that we have enough learning evidence to make the higher stake decision. Because if the low stake, we can rely only one, because we more on to feedback, and then we want to, improve the students. But if at the end of the semester you want to tell us, want to decide whether the student is, has achieved what is supposed to achieve or not, we need more data. That's why we are mapping just now. Do we have enough data to support the students' attainment of their learning outcome? So if we are very happy with that, so it means that we can make my final decision based on whatever the learning evidence that we gathered across the courses and across the 14 weeks per semester. So this is something that low stake to the high stake, and definitely in the current situation, the low stake assessment will be more visible compared to the high stake, because we are depending on lower stakes assessment compared to the higher stake assessment because of the situation. So, but the most important is we have enough learning evidence to make final decision or maybe the judgment on our students' performance according to the learning outcome that we have set at the beginning of the program. Now, let's go to the preventing unnecessary, because now we have quite happy with the learning evidence. Yes, majority of the coordinators say okay, that's quite good and enough learning evidence to support the attainment of learning outcome. Now, how about the preventing unnecessary load? Though it's not so much, but reduction in 3 assessment tasks make the student happy already. Even with the reduction of 3 assessment tasks, it means that we reduce the load of assessment from the student. The students had felt happy already. So yes, it's good when we combine. We get feedback from the student. So this is kind of the relief that the student, when they know that the assessment task has been reduced. So even though it's not so impactful, but for the student, it's adequate for them to get lower tasks. Yet we covered similar learning outcomes at the end of the day. So this is something that we found, and perhaps this model can be improved further if we think thoroughly and reimagine how to make it high impact assessment practice based on these 4 principles. And now let's look at the student perceptions. This is a student perception about their experience pertaining to assessment. Okay, so basically when we given tasks, we mean that we give loads to the student in terms of the assessment, we need to ensure 3 things. One is the appropriateness assessment. Is it relevant and fair to the student or not? And then students learning, does our assessment task motivate them? Are they going to put adequate learning effort to complete the task? Are we going to ensure that they are they're adopting deep learning approach when we are giving the assessment, or maybe surface, just a matter of to complete the assessment task, because nothing to do with me, as long as complete and done. Or maybe they want eagerly to study and to complete that because they want the proper understanding. And student coping, this is another thing, because how students cope with the assessment task, because if the student cannot cope with the assessment task, that will lead to a lot of unwanted consequences, particularly on their psychological well-being. So there is something we need to consider as well when we are given tasks and load to them. And feedback, the quantity and quality. Interestingly, from this result, he said that it's too much feedback causing a lot of psychological pressure as well. Too low feedback also cause. How are we going to balance? That is no concrete answer. How much or how many in terms of quantity we should give the students. But the most important is the students said the quality of feedback must be there. The enriched feedback and concrete feedback will help them even though in the smaller quantity. So this is something that we need to balance between the quantity and quality of the feedback when we are given to students if we are deciding to give feedback based on the assessment tasks we're given to them. So now let's go back to the current assessment. I hope that you can still remember. These are the example that I used previously. Now I'm going to give something that let's reimagining synergistic assessment practice so that it's become high impact assessment practice. Now I make it, and then I just want to put the 4 concepts: fitting purpose, ensuring the connectedness between the between the assessment, emphasize on learning evidence, and appropriate assessment load. Now the learning outcome will be similar. Okay, the platform will be or maybe the online, still online, but I'm going to share you my own experience. It's not yet implemented, but I'm sharing you my own experience who are going through this assessment method. They call it as action learning project. It's about 8 to 12 weeks. You can do it group by group, or you can do it individually. It's depending on we have to decide, whether we want to go by group. It means that you need to find your colleague and work on that project, or maybe you are basically confident enough to do it on your own without any other group member. So it's up to you, but perhaps group is better compared to the individual. So based on this action learning project, we have 4 things. But it will cover C2, C4, C5, P5, and A4. One is 360-degree assessment. So basically, we got feedback from peers. We get feedback from the coordinator, we get feedback supervisor, and those feedback is counted toward the grading at the end of the day. So there is one under action learning. We call it ALP. And the second one is project proposal. It's about 2,000 words. It's less than how many? A few pages. We have to analyze. We have to understand the subject, and then we come up with a project proposal, and then propose to the coaches. We call it coaches because we have the coaches who are monitoring our project proposal. So this is something that we, from ourselves or from our group, have to propose. And then later on, project showcase. So we need to showcase our project, and it's a kind of grand challenge. So everybody will be online, presenting what's your project outcomes, and everybody giving feedback and many more. Okay. And then last but not least, we need to produce a project report, which is a kind of manuscript. That's a very short 3,000 to 5,000 report, something like that. So all of this, basically, when I reflect on this experience and looking at this learning outcome, perhaps I can say that 360 degree maybe cover the A4 because other people will give feedback on how we integrate meaningful values to the information that we given to them. And then perhaps project proposal maybe cover C2, C4, example. Able to explain, definitely. During the project proposal, I have to explain the subject matter well. And then I have to organize all the information in logical manner so that it can develop into a logical problem statement that justify my project proposal based on the topic given or the courses given. And then looking at project showcase is about how I perform on a specific scale. For example, the communication scale, how I'm convince others people to accept my proposal and many more. So this is something P5 is Sakamoto. And project report is about C5 is able to appraise various information based on the best evidence. So if I'm looking at this and compared to what we have done, even though synergistic just now simple version, so I think I would love this kind of assessment because in terms of quantity, it's not so much, just 4, but under one umbrella, action learning project, and we work on that for 8 to 12 weeks in group. And then we submit it together, but there are no coaches who are coaching us to ensure that they give feedback to us, and then we are on the right direction. And they basically clarify misconceptions about certain concept when we develop the project proposal. And this is the online courses. Okay, this is online course. And now, based on that, let's come back to the table that I shared with you previously. This is before synergy. This is only synergistic, but a simple version. Just put across courses. But now, let's reimagine synergy assessment practice with the new version, the action learning project as example. You can see that there is something similar, 360 assessment, project proposal, project showcase, and project report. And if looking at those, I think this can be fit very well, because when we do SRM, MC, LAM, OM, and FIDE, basically we can apply this. Can apply. And project proposal, yeah, definitely across courses as well. Project showcase, definitely based on the project, we can go on and assess the student how well basically they can practice on specific skill that they are required or expected to mastery at the end of the courses. And project report, definitely how well they write and report the manuscript based on the latest evidence in medical education related to those courses. So I think looking at this one, if you're looking at fitting purpose, yes, definitely fitting purpose. The assessment is, basically achieving the purpose, and they ensure that the connection between the courses in terms of how to connect the dots so that it's become better and motivate the students. Definitely, when I go through, it's really motivating because it gives in-depth understanding about the subject. And learning evidence, yeah, definitely, we have all the learning evidence to support the achievement or attainment of the learning outcome. And the best part is less assessment load. And then it's very focused, yet achieving all those courses, courses learning outcomes, this cognitive learning outcomes. So perhaps this is just one of the examples. Okay, this is just one of the examples that I myself have experienced before. And this one just to reimagine if those kind of assessment can be implemented in the current courses, that will be wonderful, because it will amplify the learning effects or the learning outcomes of our students, even though there will be less assessment loads in terms of the quantity and frequency. But the duration 8 to 12 weeks is still remain as it is, as what we have planned. Now, perhaps let me reflect on something. After going through all this kind of, maybe we call it just initial experience on how we synergize the assessment, and my own experience when we are looking and reflect back on what we have done in terms of to synergize all of the assessment methods, perhaps how should we cultivate all this? Okay, how do we cultivate all this? One is what we do is basically open discussion. So basically, we have to sit together. So all the courses, this is only among courses, But if let's say we want to go for among programs, it means that program A to program B across, we interdisciplinary. Definitely, we need to have open discussion. Who is going to be the owner? Who is going to take care of this? What is your role? What is your whatsoever? There are so many things we need to discuss. And who is going to make rubric for the assessment? Who is going, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of discussion should be happen at that junction. But from our experience, it's always good to clarify expectation, whereby we need to ensure everyone is on the same page. So this is something that will, ease out all this and iron out all the maybe misconception, misunderstanding, who is responsible, and so on and so forth. Okay, and then I think this is something that perhaps in the future, if we are implementing that kind of assessment, perhaps it is good to have assessment culture cafe, so other people can share their best practice in assessment, just like today. Today is just the initial, the something that is to initiate the thing. But perhaps once everybody are on to it, perhaps other people also can share their assessment cultures with everyone so that we can learn from each other. And then in terms of support, definitely, I think when we are doing it seriously, definitely support system should be there because it will boost moral and enhance positive assessment culture because a lot of support required, particularly in terms of the capacity support. And then looking at a role model, definitely we need to have somebody who already done it, or maybe the best is the leaders themselves who are using that kind of approach in terms of the practicing the assessment. And then training, definitely, I think training, when you call training, definitely CDE will come in because the training part is a must because we need to ensure that the individuals who are carrying out all this assessment approach have to have a better capacity and ability to understand and to practice in the context. Last but not least, I think if something that really we want to go toward this, it should be embedded at the institutional level, and many unlocking have to be done because the current system with the synergistic assessment system need to draw some guidelines on how to either is accommodating to the current system or the current system accommodating the future system that involve the policy and so on and so forth. I think there is something that that's for further discussion because from our experience, it's not easy, but for the students, they like it very much because particularly in terms of the assessment load is reduced, even though we are covering the same learning outcomes. And finally, before we go for discussion, perhaps synergistic assessment, looking at the whole thing is about purposeful assessment. We need to clarify purpose, definitely. And we need to ensure the connected assessment because when we connect the dots, it will amplify the effects. Because if we put the dots in the right place, we connected the right place, so definitely the learning impacts will be enhanced and sometimes amplified if it's properly connected. And then the learning evidence are the key because we are looking at the learning evidence. And last but not least is about the appropriate assessment load given to the students. That is very important because it is related to the well-being of the students since assessment is something that cause stress and anxiety to any of students. So I think that's so far that I'm going to share here. Perhaps now it's time for Q&A, maybe discussion or maybe comments or feedback. So that's all. Thank you so much. So perhaps I hand over back to Prof. Kadim.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Saiful, for very enlightening presentation. So in most cases, each course will do their own assessment, right? That's normally what we do.
Yes.
Okay. So in this case, the assessment approach is by having several courses combined force and offer one big assessment across the courses, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's basically the idea. So, okay, let's look at some questions. We have a few questions. I have collected all the questions in one slide here. So let me share the slide.
Okay, let me stop sharing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So maybe can go through the question one by one.
Yeah.
The first one here, we are talking about connecting the dots because you mentioned about the connectedness.
Yes.
Yeah, the connectedness. So who is responsible to connect the dots? The educators or the learners? So this question from Dr. Rahana.
Okay, so basically both sides are responsible. The first one is the first person who is responsible to design the assessment is the educator, because basically educator is the designer for the assessment. And if you're looking at the assessment, it drives the learning behavior of the students. If we put the design of our assessment in the connectedness manner, so the student will automatically will follow the dots and they will connecting the dots on their own. See, so basically it's both sides. It's a two-way traffic, because the educators must put efforts as well as the learners have to put efforts when the educators have designed the assessment design according to the principle. So I think that would be the my response to the first questions. I hope it's clear enough.
Okay, Dr. Hana, if the
Dr. Hana, would you like to?
You can follow up. You can unmute the microphone if you want to ask further.
Okay, brilliant. Assalamualaikum, Prof. Karim. Assalamualaikum, Dr. Saiful. Thank you so much for allowing me to participate like this. My follow-up question is, how do you get the learners to buy in? Because your presentation showed a very in-depth preparation. As an educator, you prepared, you've got lots of ideas and you engage your other educators. How do you get your learners to buy into this? Because I think that's the challenge as well. When I say the question, who is responsible? I know the learners too must shoulder the responsibility, but how do you get them to participate? How do you get them to say, okay, I am responsible and I have to also do my part? What's your strategy? Thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Okay,
good question.
Good question. Let me depend on my experience, just a very minimal experience doing this. So basically what we do is we communicate with them. So basically whatever the changes we do, because after the MCO, we have to change, almost revamp the whole assessment into online. There is an example. So we communicate with the students, we tell them, okay, this is a kind of the new assessment that we are going to do, but definitely your learning time will be interrupted. It means it remain the same. Just a matter of reduction of the 3 assessment tasks. That's all. Previously, if you are doing alone, it's about 21 learning tasks. But now it reduced to 3 and it become 18. So the discounted rate, this kind of the discounted rate assessment load. But you are covering the same learning outcome. We are assessing the same. So far, based on my interaction with the student, the students is still manageable, within that, within that the scope of assessment. Though we have changed it into a combined assessment, we can share assessment between the 2 courses. But we start with 2 courses first because we are trying, we are piloting. So we minimize the number of courses to be combined at the first stage because we want to see the result. But so far, the students are quite satisfied with our, with our approach.
So I guess it's very important to convince the students by telling them that the number of assessments are reduced. So that's where the part I think they are happy about, because it's less, but we don't compromise in terms of the learning outcome.
Yes,
that's very important.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 2, how effective is assessment if it's not authentic? So the combined assessment, how authentic is the assessment, Dr. Saiful?
So I think authentic is, if you're looking at authentic meaning that how real the assessment to the real problems, to the real career, or maybe to the real practice that they will apply the knowledge. So basically, if you are looking at authentic, it's always we need to refer to the PEO, the program educational objective. For example, after 3 to 5 years, what are the roles expected to be carried out by our student? For example, let's say in our student and medical educationist, there will be the consultant. For example, the consultants in the medical education. So our role is to ensure that they get the real grasp of the concept, the principle of the concept, and they will be able to argue and appraise and organize the thought flow into something that is simple enough for other people to understand. So there is a competency they need to achieve 3 to 5 years after graduation. So we map our assessment just now to ensure that the students are trained to be like that. For example, just now, if you can recall, one of the assessment is about the research proposal, because they are expected to carry out educational research. So they need to prepare a research proposal that are related to the real world, addressing the real gaps in the area, and then they come up with a concrete and justified proposal that to be presented to the department. So they basically one of the authentic. So in that sense, you can see that research proposal is authentic enough to reflect their role as a researcher in medical education after 3 to 5 years. So that's one of the example on how we see the authentic assessment, because it doesn't mean it's online, it's not authentic, but it depends on the purpose and then what the expectation of us on the student to carry out certain role when they are graduating. So in our context, they are expected to be a competent educational researcher in medical education after 3 to 5 years. So it means that the research proposal here is good enough for us to judge whether they are ready and they are prepared to carry out the role in the future. So that's one of the examples that I can give you based on relate to our program as well as the example that I gave it to you just now. I hope that kind of explanation is clear enough. How do we want to know is authentic or not authentic?
Yeah, the person who asked the question, maybe, if you want to ask further, you can unmute the microphone here. In fact, actually, I'm the one who asked the question. Anyway, let's go to question number 3.
Okay.
How to make it work if the learning outcomes are similar, but the content could be different from Dr. Law? Yeah.
How to make it work if learning outcomes are similar, but the content could be different? Yeah, I think that's why one of the initial thing that we need to do, we need to map the learning outcome across the courses if you want to combine, because there are certain that generic, in the courses there are certain generic learning outcome. For example, I shared to you the 5 things that are generic to all the courses, but there are something that is very unique and specific to the courses. So I think to combine, we need to select the generic learning outcome. For the specific one, we need to think a different way, because maybe there are certain courses have a different specific requirement that is not in other courses. So perhaps my advice is, the first is lay out the purpose. What is the common purpose across the courses? What will be the specific only for that courses? So the specific one, try to avoid to combine. Try to avoid combine the specific one. But for those common one, please combine. So I think that is my I think that's practical advice based on our experience. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Okay. Number 4 here from EAC, they emphasize of explicit assessment for each program outcomes. Your thoughts on this one?
EAC stand for? Oh, sorry.
The engineering board. Engineering.
Oh, engineering board. Okay.
Accreditation. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. For the engineering board, I think this is something that beyond our control, basically, because it's professional requirement. Just like in the professional body, for example, MMC. We have a certain guidelines that we need to follow, but there are certain guidelines that we can maneuver. So perhaps my advice is based on our experience as well. I think we need to really look at the guidelines, which one is within our control that we can manipulate, mean that we can maneuver. But within the certain area that beyond our control, we have to follow. Then my advice is you need to follow. Otherwise, you cannot get the accreditation from the professional body. Create a lot of problem to us. So to me, my experience in professional body as well, anything we have to follow, we have to follow. But anything within our control that we can maneuver, we will maneuver in that sense. So that is my answer to your question.
Okay. So you want to take number 5, Dr. Saiful, action learning project. Is it suitable for a big number of students?
Yes, it was designed for big number of students to make it smaller. Because action learning project is basically, this is from my experience, because I attended one of the online learning courses under INSEAD, under INSEAD, under INSEAD, INSSEAD. So they put it as action learning project. Quite interesting because we are a big group. How many? More than 100, I think. Yeah, enrolled all over the world. It's come from all over the world. Okay, what we did from the first week, because it's about 12 weeks, 12-week courses, 3 months, about 3 months. So the first week they already give, this is the expected assignment. It's only ALP, we call it, Action Learning Project. And everything has been spelled out. Week 1 to week 2, what do you expect to achieve? Now, week 2 to week 4, this is something that you need to achieve. They already just like a timeline for everybody to go through the whole process. For example, for the first week, we have to come up with our brief proposal of what we want to do about the topic. So we have to, for 2 weeks, we have to come up with, what would be the real gaps in our, we call it need analysis. We do a need analysis. And then after that, we move on with the answering several other subsequent tasks, a bit by bit, until we have a complete. We have to come up with, to have to showcase in the 12th slide. They only give 12 slides. You want to showcase your outcome in the 12th slide, and then later on, that particular slide, we need to put in proper report and submit it to peers as well as coaches and facilitators before we can be given pass or fail. So that's quite not only one, but there are several components, and definitely we engage a lot. And in the big group, we are consulting each other through online. We communicate through, for example, WebEx, and then we have forum and many more. But we really engage, we really learn, and we understand the concept. Maybe because I'm the adult learner, but for the undergraduate, maybe we need to try. That is the limitation I need to mention here. Maybe because of adult learner, we are mature student. That's why we can go on with our own, our own way. But for the fresh students, particularly for the undergraduate, whether ALP is good or not good, we need to try. I don't know. I don't have the answer.
Okay, the next question from Dr. Abbas, Dr. Saiful. How to engage students in low-stake assessment activities? Speaking from experience, majority of students would ask, is this graded or not? If the answer is yes, they may pull on. If the answer is no, they may not bother. So I only attend to those who want to learn. So your thoughts?
Okay, now, and our challenge now, we are in the conventional assessment right now. Our culture is conventional assessment culture. And then the other one is different culture. That is definitely, we call it synergistic assessment culture. In order for us to really tell the student whether it is graded or not graded, if in the synergistic assessment, everything counted to at the end. It means that even the low stakes assessment will somehow contribute to the assessment of their competency at the end of the day. But in the conventional culture right now, it's very unfortunate because we are compartmentalized. If let's say you give a low stake, it won't be counted into the final grade. That is the problem. So if you want to ask me, if in synergistic assessment culture, definitely, they will be motivated because everything counted. But in conventional assessment, depend on the students. So depend on the student. If the student are motivated, yes.
Okay, the next question: when you do the action learning project, with involving more than, several courses involved. So any issue on the commitment of the course owners and also on the coordination?
Yes.
So there's a logistic aspect of it.
Yeah, in terms of logistics, we are very fortunate because we have, we call it the program coordinator as well as program courses coordinator, isn't it? We have 2 levels, the program coordinator, and then we have a courses coordinator. very fortunate because we have very committed people. Because we are very fortunate because we have dedicated and committed coordinators to the program coordinator. They are willing to discuss and be open to ensure that the student have the best learning experience in terms of the assessment. But if in any other school, I think we need to experiment first to see how it is. I'm very fortunate because everybody here medical educationists. So we know our roles as educators. But for those who are non-educationists, I think you might have a lot of challenges.
Okay, that's good.
A lot of challenges. So please experiment and share with us.
Yeah, start small. Start small.
Yeah, start small. Start small.
Okay, what about weightage? How do the course owners decide? Okay, the weightage from each course to do the whole project.
I think what we did is basically we asked the two course coordinators to discuss and decide. And that's all. So because they already agreed to collaborate, because when in the meeting, we already can you, OM and FDL can combine or not? Because you have almost similar competency to look at and your content almost, even though you have a unique thing, but most very common thing. So is that possible for you, both of you working together? If they say yes, then what we do as a department, we empower them, we trust them. Okay, both of you please decide what will be the weightage, and you come up with the assessment rubric and present it to the department for for validation and basically to make it as legal basically. Then if we agree, then we go on. So basically empowerment and entrustment to the coordinators who willingly to combine the assessment. So that is our experience. I hope that helps.
All right. Okay. Let's take a question from Dr. Farhan here. We get 3:56 p.m. Can we define or identify the limitation of synergistic assessment? Can synergistic assessment work for all types of outcome?
Yes, I think based on my understanding and with the limited experience, because we haven't test in a wide manner, but limited experience, yes. As long as we can find the connection between the courses in terms of learning outcomes, we can do it, definitely. But we need to address those who are those specific learning outcome that is difficult to connect, which is always disconnected. Okay, that we call it the specific outcome. So I think the specific outcome, I think we need to address as it is, because it is a special requirement related to the specific course. Anything that is generic, you can always combine.
Yeah.
From our experience, the limitation is we cannot do for every learning outcome. That's all.
Yeah, theoretically, there should be some common ground, because all the courses must kind of align back to the program outcome, right? Yeah, especially the generic one. Okay, so we have Dr. JJ here. So he's also an expert himself. So let's take his question or comment. Let me see here. Yeah, there's a question from Dr. JJ there. How is it that different courses that address the same MQF 1.0 learning outcome domains and the same complexity level, but different substance, content, and different context? Do you see the question at 4:02 p.m.? 4:02 p.m.
Oh, this one. How is it that different courses that address the same MQF domain and the same complexity level, but different substance, content, and different? Oh, okay. So you mean that how to apply synergistic assessment in that particular MQF 1.0? It's not 2.0, 1.0, the 9 learning outcomes. Okay. Now, I think if you are looking at the MQF, definitely in terms of the teams, yes, they look generic. Okay, they look generic because there is a common things that we expect from across courses, regardless of universities, because it's become the qualification. But when it's trickled down to the specific courses, it might evolve to a different specific skill that is only related to that particular profession. For example, a medical, clinical, for example, clinical skill is only specific to the medical doctors, even though it's under practical skill. You know, can you see the practical skill? But when it's taken down to the ground, is basically is related to the technical skill, which is not related to other courses and the program across the university, or maybe across intra the university as well. So this is something that we call it as a unique practical skill that evolved from one main chunk into the specific courses. But there is example, let's say they are looking at communication skill. Let's look at the communication skill. Regardless of we call it courses, the communication skill will be similar, isn't it? The theory, but the use and the application of communication is for different purpose. For example, in medical, we are using that communication to take history from the patient. You remember when you go to the doctors, and then doctors are talking to you, basically there is a communication skill for history taking for us to make diagnosis. So there's a very specific skill to that particular communication skill, but for the generic communication skill is similar. So for the generic specific skill, you can always synergize the assessment with the grand challenge, with the high-end, high-impact whatsoever. You can always combine. But for the specific one, you really need to address those specific needs of skill, set of skill for that particular profession. So that is my, answer in terms of MQF 1.0, even though it's similar, but there will be generic as well as specific in that particular context.
Okay.
I hope I answered the question.
I think it's getting clearer. Thank you to Dr. JJ for the questions. I think it's good to have expert in the audience because they can ask very specific questions that can help to clarify things to us, to other audience. Okay, maybe we take the last questions. I mean, at least the one that posted here. At 407 there from one Muhammad Amran. Students can be territorial when it comes to their learning in the sense that they are not used to the notion of applying what they have learned in course A in courses B, C, etc. However, I think this synergistic assessment approach can help overcome this challenge. What steps can we take to think in this big picture manner when it comes to their learning? So,
okay, let me try to digest first the question because it's quite long, but at the end it's about how we want to take steps to maybe to promote their learning. Is it one? It's about how the assessment can promote their learning through synergistic assessment. Is it? What do you mean? Yes.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Good. Okay. So mean that I understand it correctly. So
Yes.
in terms of remember, assessment is always a key to drive learning. Now, let's say if we manipulate the assessment system from the conventional to something that is non-conventional, it's more to innovative or maybe different ways. So definitely the learners will follow whatever we have designed according to the assessment. And research have shown that if you design assessment improperly, they will get a improper learning behaviors. But if you go through the assessment with good design, have an impactful design, and synergize in design, you will get appropriate learning behaviors from your students. So the key word is design your assessment properly.
Okay.
Design properly.
I think synergistic assessment and also action learning project and so on. I think it should be really encouraged so that we can have more application of this in other courses as well, in other programs as well. Maybe I will take another, two more questions so that we can clarify further on this idea. So anyone who like to ask question, feel free to unmute the microphone.
Prof. Karim,
Yes,
Yeah.
Prof. Adam.
I just want to ask a question
Okay, yeah, Prof.
to
Adam.
Prof. Saiful, because from medical educationist punya perspective, your view if the bell curve is shifting towards the excellent all the time?
Oh, okay. Okay. Now I understood. Okay, now in an assessment, you have two kind of judgment. One is about the criterion judgment, and the other one is a reference judgment. Okay, norm reference. Okay, norm reference. If let's say we depend on the criterion judgment, it means that the student need to meet the criteria in order for them to pass. Okay, that is for the criterion based judgment. And if let's say norm reference judgment is depending on the cohort, which means that you're referring to the bell curve. Regardless of their performance, if they are the best, or for example, let's say they pass the bell curve at the right side, they will pass. And in the criterion base, there can be a total shift to the right and total shift to the left. Because those who are fulfilled, the criteria will be passed. For example, in medical, we do not compromise, based on the norm reference. We mean that bell curve. We are not using bell curve because we have certain standard. If the student ABC have achieved standard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they will pass. If all students achieve the standards, they will all pass because it's depending on the standard that has been set the specialists in the area. But if you follow the norm reference, maybe you have set 80% of the student pass. Regardless of the score, the 80% above, it means that the top 80% will pass regardless of the standard. So that is dangerous for the norm reference because it's about bell curve. But for the standard reference, we don't mind if they shift all to the right or shift to the left as long as they meet the standard that has been set by the expert. That is a different level of judgment, criteria and norm reference.
Okay, I just want to ask sikit maksud macam ni, masa katalah sekarang ni in any assessment, majoriti dapat A lah, majoriti dapat A kan, semua dapat A plus, yang fail ataupun yang B tu mungkin seorang dua je. Maknanya, does it mean that the assessment is flawed kalau semua orang dapat A?
Okay, kalau daripada pandangan kami, from my views in terms of assessment, if you are using the standard as your reference, if looking at the A standard, then there is no flaws in the assessment because we already set the standard. A defined is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if our students achieve all the description under A, it means that the training is good. Not the flaws in the assessment because the assessment already set the standard.
So that means that the teacher are very good lah.
Yes. If let's say the standard is there, all fail, it's not about the assessment because assessment already have the standard.
Yeah.
We are not referring to the average mark or whatever. That is the standard. If everybody fail, it's not about the assessment flaw. It's about the teaching flaw. Yes. It can be like the way.
Yeah, because I've seen lah in some cases, especially the continuous assessment.
Yes.
Well, I mean, some other the educators are linear or not, but there are cases that students score very highly, maknanya mungkin 100, mungkin 90, majority of them. So I don't know whether the assessment is not quite
Easy.
appropriate lah. That's why they score low. I'm not sure.
Then in that case, if you have no doubts about the assessment, then you need to check assessment first. We need to verify the assessment follow the standard. If the assessment has followed rigorously, comprehensively the standard, then you can say that your teachers are good.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I have a feeling that there's a flaw in the way that we do assessment. I think we really need to look at this, urgently, because I think there's been a practice. I think when the result is not normally distributed, then the majlis will try to, discuss in the majlis, then we try to normalize the unnormalized, normal curve. So, yeah, it is, as Prof. Adam has highlighted, the first thing people would kind of speculate what's wrong with the result. Is it the students, this batch, this cohort is too good to be true, or is it because the assessment, the question has not been set properly, it's too easy? But I think if the standard has been followed properly, we shouldn't question, right? So yeah, I think that's very good, and the very good question also from Prof. Adam, that we realize, and I learned a new thing also today. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this. Very, very important. I think Dr. Farhan is here listening. So I think it's something that we really need to look at.
May I respond? I think this is true, because in the past, assessment is actually not for the student but for the lecturers. It is for me. So I think this is where we have to change the mindset, and rightly so. Assessment is to measure the attainment of learning outcomes. I think if we all understand that, we will then design our assessment accordingly. I think this is the principle of constructive alignment anyway. I think it requires a change in mindset, and I agree lah. Memang dulu memang kita begitulah, kita over obsessed about normalization, and somehow we have a preconceived idea that everything has to be normalized. So I agree dengan jawapan Prof. Saiful. If we do the reliability or validity of our assessment is proper with a proper design and with the proper rubrics, we should be confident, and we should be proud if all our students are able to answer our questions accordingly. So that's straightforward, I think. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, great. Maybe one last question. If anyone like to ask one big questions. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Okay. I have a question.
One last
Saiful,
question.
has this been tested on the clinical side of things? Because your example is more on the perhaps the theory part. Is there something that has been, because we want to try this at engineering as well, across faculty and so on. It's not easy. So I was wondering if there is an example from Saiful that is actually on the clinical side of assessment.
Okay. For the clinical side, even though we are not declared that as synergistic assessment, but the element of the synergistic assessment has been done in our clinical years. For example, let's say SHOT. The SHOT is basically shadow houseman training. And if you are looking at the assessment is basically across, because when we develop the assessment, we are considering what are the generic skill that can be assessed across the departments. I mean that across the posting, and what are the specific skill in terms of the clinical skill that is only particularly related to that particular department. So we have done that, and then across the logbook, we are using the logbook. Across the logbook, we specify consistently across department. These are the common and generic procedures that are available across the departments. And one is, for example, a specific, for example, let's say ONG, obstetric and gynecology. The skill that is belong to ONG is delivery. Delivery, I mean that managing the labor, during the labor, and then we call it a speculum and many more, which is specific to ONG. So based on this, basically, we realize we have done the synergistic assessment in our clinical years, whereby we spell out clearly what are the competency across, and during the final professional exam, we assess once. Those are particularly common to everybody. For example, in the long case and the short case, we assess that regardless of their posting, because we are confident this assessment is basically cater across the board because there is a common and generic scale that is available across departments. So I think somehow we have done it, even though we did not declare it synergistic assessment. I can share with you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think with that, I would like to thank Professor Madia, Dr. Muhammad Saiful for very insightful sharing this afternoon on the topic of synergistic assessment. I think it's been very it's kind of eye-opening also for me. I learned a few things, and thank you very much for all the participants, and also for the good questions from the experts, from Dr. JJ, from others, from Dr. Raihana, and so on. And hopefully what we have learned today, we can bring back something practical that we can apply immediately, so that we can approach our assessment with new ideas, and we can provide a better learning experience for our students. So with that, saya sudahi dengan ucapan Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Saiful. Thank you, Prof. Karim.
Thank you Dato'. Thank you semua.
Sama-sama.